Have you ever taken a moment to go through all of your handmade items and look for commonalities between them? Yeah, I hadn't either until now. And by the end of this video, I think you're gonna be running to your FO drawer to do the same. Hey everyone, it's Natalie, also known as Nitty Natty. Today I am joined by Toaster, and I know I have a little scratch on my nose right here that I inflicted upon myself when I tried to blow my nose and it didn't go well. I also know that I have a little makeup on my sweatshirt, but we're not going to be bogged down by that. It doesn't matter. It's not relevant to the video. I am sitting here with a big pile of hand knits that we are going to go through today, and they are all knitted items, so I really felt like we needed a little crochet love in this video. And I'm wearing one of my new favorite sweatshirts from Tony Lipsy. You can get it at TL Yarn Crafts. Definitely size up. I had to cut off the bottom band of mine because it would not fit around these hips. But other than that, I really, really love this sweatshirt. So I'm going to take you through 7 of my most worn items that I have knit over the last few years. I think the oldest one in here is 6 years old, and I'm going to be sharing with you things that I've learned from them, things that I love about them, things that I would change if I knit them again. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to share with you one thing that I will never knit again under any circumstances. We're going to start with one of my oldest projects, and that is the Boxy. This is a pattern by Joji Locatelli. It was published originally in 2012, and I knit this in February and March of 2016. So my mistake. I have a 7-year-old project here. I love this sweater so much. It is a really easy knit because most of it is just a big giant stockinette tube, which makes it, I think, a pretty great first sweater. I really just loved how easy it was to make. I loved how easy it was to fit. I really loved wearing it for a long time. I would wear like a tank top and skinny jeans and boots like when I first was wearing it. Now it's a little bit too long and too boxy for me, and I've tried to remedy that in my latest iteration of Boxy. But the great thing about this pattern is that there are so many different versions. Joji has come out with, this is the fingering weight version. There's a worsted weight version, I know for sure. There may be also like a sport weight or a DK weight. There's a V-neck version. There's the lace and fade Boxy. And most recently, she just came out with something, it's called something entirely different. I think it's called like Elton or something, but it is basically a Boxy. And there are so many great patterns from this one pattern that I just really, really love. So for next time, I would definitely take out a little bit of the width. Just be careful if you do that, because when you take out width, it moves up your arm, and you will definitely want to extend the armhole to cover that. I explain this way more in my podcast, my most recent podcast. So if you're interested, go there. Just proceed with caution. And maybe take care on the length, seeing as right now cropped sweaters are really, really in, but you can always try it on to see how it's going to fit you best. But this has definitely been one of the sweaters I have worn most over the years, and I would certainly knit it again. The one other thing is that when I originally knit this, I used a BFL yarn, which is just a little bit of a rougher wool. So I would pick something a little softer, like a superwash merino and nylon, maybe even like a 2-ply yarn, because I think it would make it really soft and light and airy. Another one of my most worn sweaters is a pullover called the Weekender Light by Andrea Mowry. I love this sweater. I love almost everything about this sweater. There is 2 things that I would change, but I love the fit. I love the length, how it came out on me. I love that it's a simple sweater with this nice little slip stitch detail that goes down the front and the back. I think it just really, really makes it. The body of the sweater is reverse stockinette stitch. However, the way that Andrea designs it is really clever, and you get to knit most of the sweater so that you're not like purling on this whole thing, because I know a lot of us don't like to purl. And the sleeves are stockinette. It has a really, really lovely detail here at the top, as well as like a reverse or like an inside out kind of seam. It's just the smallest details, I think, sometimes that make a really nice sweater. This pattern came out in 2020, and I think it came out in like June 2020, and I knit it from August to November of 2020. So I didn't realize that I made it pretty much right when it came out. This, I think, is the second iteration of the Weekender sweater. So there's the Weekender that's a heavier weight yarn, and this one is the Weekender Light, which is a fingering weight. I used Knit Pick Stroll in Jackrabbit Heather, and this is a really affordable yarn, and it really has held up really nicely in my sweater. It's also like lightweight and just makes the best drape. And then the other thing I like about this sweater is that it has a split hem, which for a body type like mine, where I'm smaller in the bust and larger in the hips, it really just fits so nicely. The back hem is also 1.5 inches or so longer than the front, and I think that just makes things look amazing. Now, what I would change about this sweater: I don't love neckline. I think you can tell just from me holding it up that it is high in the front and it comes a little bit wide. So you kind of have to be careful with what you're wearing underneath, kind of push the bra straps out of the way. I don't really know how to change this, but I'm guessing if you're able to kind of hack in maybe some short rows in the back and maybe in the front, you could kind of give yourself more of a scooped neckline, and that would work a lot better. The one other thing is that with all Andrea Mowry patterns, I find that I need to lengthen my armhole. So look very carefully at the schematics, check your bust measurement and your sleeve measurements. And if you need to, you can pick the bust measurement that you need. And when it comes to the armholes, you can extend them by knitting them longer and then moving up a size or two in the sleeve pickup. It's a really easy hack to combine different sweater sizes. Like the sizing has already been worked out for you, but you can just combine them in one sweater to make one that really fits you well. You knew that this one was coming. This is the Musselburgh hat by Isolde Teague. This pattern came out in December of 2019, and then when Kay of the Crazy Sock Lady started knitting these, I feel like it totally resurged, and maybe it's just my perspective because I was following Kay and then seeing all the people that knit it because of Kay, but it really came around a couple of years after the pattern first came out. So much so that Isolde then went back and added more sizes and more gauges to the pattern. So this one I knit in 2021, and it is just kind of a classic Musselburgh hat. This one I completed this past year in 2022, later in the year, and this is my favorite one so far. What is so great about this hat pattern is it's a really simple hat. It starts at one crown, and watch this, dun, da, da, da. You work to the other. So you increase, then you work a big old stockinette tube, and then you decrease. And the pattern has been written so that it can accommodate many different weights of yarn. I think from a light fingering weight all the way up to at least a worsted weight, maybe even beyond. I've only made fingering weight versions. It also has many different sizes, from really small like child sizes up to adult like large and extra large. So it's a one-time pattern purchase for like a lifetime of hats, I feel like. Now, the functionality of the hat is that it is great for wearing. It is actually warm because it is doubled up in like layers, and this really just works out so nicely. If you make it long enough where it can roll up, you get quadruple protection on your ears. And living in New York City now, I found that this is the only hat handmade that actually keeps me warm because of all those layers of warmth. The other thing that I like about it is that you can use up almost a full skein of fingering weight yarn. So if you're like me and you had tons and tons of single skeins of fingering weight, and you're like, I don't know, I don't really want to make socks with all of these, this is a great way to use that up. It's also really fun if you want to incorporate leftovers. You can do a half and half hat. So you could make half of it, use like maybe 40 to 50 grams to do half of it. And then where it's gonna split in half halfway through your knitting, change to a different color and you will literally have 2 different hats. You know, I've also been messing around with adding ribbing to these hats. I mean, I think the possibilities are completely endless. They are so much fun to make. Now, the only thing I would change about them is that I don't really wear this one as much anymore because it doesn't have the roll-up layers. It is a good hat for when it's not quite as cold outside. So really the only thing I would do differently is make more of this one. So this one has 19 inches from crown to crown, and I have details on my project page about the sizes that I've made because I did make adjustments to the number of stitches that I started with and increased to because at the time when I first made mine, there wasn't an option for 8 stitches per inch as a gauge, which is what I'm getting. This one that's a little shorter has 14 and a quarter inches between crowns, making it not roll upable, but it's still kind of slouchy. So again, there's so many possibilities with the Musselburgh hat. If you haven't knit one, it is time to try. Our first cardigan on the list is Like a Cloud by Joji Locatelli. This pattern came out in May of 2018, and I made mine from June to December 2019. Definitely took my time on this one. I wore this all the time. I don't wear it quite as much anymore just because I don't know, I haven't been wearing cardigans a lot lately, but I really love this sweater. It has a very interesting construction in the way that you pick things up and join things together. It was the first time that I had done that. It has a lovely drop shoulder, and then the whole process of getting this yarn for the sweater was really special for me. We were on a trip in Washington, I think it's Washington State, and went out to Bainbridge Island to Church Mouse Yarns, and I picked out the yarn there and got the yarn that was actually recommended for this sweater, which is Shibui lace held with their mohair, I believe, and it's lace and mohair held together throughout, which makes it like a cloud. Now, unfortunately, I believe both Church Mouse yarns and Shibui yarn are no longer, or on their way to no longer, which is really sad because they were both really, really great additions to the yarny world, and definitely correct me if I'm wrong. But that doesn't mean that you can't make this sweater. So if I were to make this again, because mine is definitely starting to look pretty sad, the texture pattern has kind of flattened out a lot, and it is just getting like very pilly and everything. It's just looking pretty sad. So if I were to make this again, I would, one, make the sleeves a little shorter. Mine are definitely too long, so much so that I have to roll them up. I didn't realize when I first started knitting sweaters that I probably needed to make the sleeve a little shorter than my actual arm to allow for stretch. And now I know that I don't weave in ends on my sleeves until I've blocked a sweater, because if it does end up a little too long or even a little too short, it's much easier for me to pull it back if I haven't already woven in the end. And then the other thing is I would make this again, but just out of a fingering weight yarn. You don't have to do the lace weight and mohair held together. I've seen plenty of people make this sweater with just a fingering weight, and it turns out just as beautiful. This one is my most recent finish that made it on the list, and it is the Something Cozy by Shayna Billow. If you haven't heard me talk about this, I'm shouting it from the rooftops. This is the coziest sweater ever. I love it so much. The pattern came out in, I think, September of 2021, and I knit mine from April to May 2022. It's a really quick knit because it is 2 yarns held together. The first of which is a really lovely boucle yarn, and the second is a mohair. Both of my yarns are from Chelsea Yarns, and I actually got them at an event where Chelsea Yarns was doing a trunk show in a yarn store, and Christina, the dyer, was wearing exactly this. And I said, I want those colors, I want to make that, and I just got the pattern, the yarn that day, and started and finished this very, very quickly thereafter. It is a pieced pattern, so you do work it from the bottom up, in pieces and then seam it together. I don't remember if I used the yarn itself to seam it or a different yarn. I remember thinking that I might need to use a different yarn to seam it just because I didn't want to break the boucle, but I can't quite recall off the top of my head. So just keep that in mind. Now, I would change two things if I made this again, and I would definitely make this again. Like, if I lost this, I would just remake it because I love it that much. And I've actually considered buying more yarn to make myself a second one because of a mistake that I made that I really don't care for on this sweater. So the first thing would just be, I would make it a little bit longer. I think right now it's about 11 inches for the body, and I would give myself maybe 2 or 3 more inches just because I don't like something that's quite this cropped. The second thing is this. So I don't know if you can tell. I mean, you definitely can. The front of the sweater, I used 1 skein of yarn, and it did this really lovely pooling. The back of the sweater, I got nervous about running out of yarn. I didn't need to be, I had plenty of yarn, and I decided to alternate my yarns. They were 2 very different colors, and I got stripes, which I don't care for. I don't think they look bad, but I really don't like that the front of the sweater and the back of the sweater are so drastically different. So my recommendation would be, if you're using hand-dyed boucle yarn, just take care to use the same technique throughout the sweater. If you're gonna alternate to blend your yarns, alternate. If you're not gonna alternate, then maybe if you need more than 1 skein for 1 piece, fade in your next one by just alternating a couple times and then working it. I don't know. The best thing would be just to get the closest few skeins that you can find, but when they're hand dyed, you can't really control that. The dyer can't really control that. They will all come out slightly differently. But I couldn't recommend this pattern or this yarn enough, and this is what I feel like people mean when they say, oh, this is like a comfy sweatshirt type of hand knit. This one truly is. I've just discovered that I've made another white lie on accident. This is actually the oldest project here in this pattern lineup. So this is the Honey Cowl by Antonia Shankland. The pattern came out in 2010, and I knit this one in 2014, which I honestly can't believe. It means that this actual project is coming up on 10 years of age, and I feel like that's a really big deal because I am somebody who goes through my finished objects regularly and donates or gives away things that I am not wearing. So for this to actually stick around for that long is a very big deal. So this is a really lovely pattern, free by the way. It takes 2 skeins of DK weight to make this double loop version, or you can make a single loop version with 1 skein of DK, though I really wouldn't recommend that one because I don't think it actually has the warmth properties that I love so much about the double loop version. So it's a really simple pattern. It has a very beautiful slip stitch on it, an easy rolled edge, and it just comes out so nicely. Some things to watch out for is that you want to really keep your cast on and bind off nice and loose, or you'll end up with a cowl that kind of looks a little bit like a smile and is like too tight on one end. I've done that before. But it's a really great way to use up 2 skeins of DK weight that you have in stash, or maybe if you have just 1 skein of DK weight, like 2 different colors, you could even potentially stripe this. I don't think that would be a big issue. It bundles up so perfectly. It's just the right amount of like heavy fabric without being too stiff that you can wrap it around your neck twice, and it really like comes up and kind of fills in those gaps between your coat ending and your hat starting on your ears, and just keeps the wind off of your neck and like any part of your like collarbone or anything that is exposed. So I don't wear this unless it gets quite cold outside because my jacket and my hat, my Musselburgh hat, do a pretty good job. But I do find that this is a staple for me throughout the winter here in New York City. I did wear it before in Texas. I just didn't loop it up quite as tight, and I would wear it with like a t-shirt or something just to be cute and have a little scarf on. If I made this again in the future, which I definitely would make anything of this kind of shape and size, it's just wonderful, I would probably make myself a nice bright color now, and I would maybe make it slightly wider, although I do think it's pretty great as is. So honey cowl, I couldn't recommend this pattern enough. The person in the apartment above us has just begun their lunchtime workout. They do this almost every day, and for some reason I think they just like to drop their weights on the floor as they're working out. So if you hear any like bangs, that is what is going on. I have one more pattern to show you, and I think we've saved the best for last, but don't go anywhere after this because I have made some really interesting discoveries by looking at these favorites that I picked out as a collection and seeing commonalities between them. I also have discovered some really important things that are going to inform my next sweater cast on that I can't believe in all my years of knitting I haven't thought to do. Okay, so here's the last one. This is the Long Summer Cardigan by Joji Locatelli. This may be the project that I am most proud of, and this I think has trumped the Boxy sweater as my most worn make. It is just a beautiful, oh, did I say it's by Joji Locatelli? I can't remember. Long Summer Cardigan. It is just a super duper long, like to the knee, past the knee, depending on how you make it, cardigan that has lots of fun twisted stitches, and I say fun in almost in jest because it wasn't that fun when I was making it. I will say that. It's a really big undertaking because it's a really long sweater, and it's knit flat because it's a cardigan. So you're doing a lot of purl through the back loop. I did get a lot better at purling through the back loop and faster over time, but it definitely wasn't the most fun when I was making it, but the results I think are worth it. So this is something that I throw on all of the time. Sometimes I wear it at home if I'm just wearing a t-shirt and I get cold. It's almost like a robe in that way. It's just very comfortable to wear. And then I wear it out all the time because it's a light enough layer that it works really well in the fall and in the spring, at least here in New York. But it is also good as something I can wear if I'm wearing a t-shirt. I can put this on and it kind of dresses up my outfit, and then put on my winter coat during the winter. It works just as well, and I don't get too hot. I really do like wearing knitted cardigans because, again, it's the layer factor. I can take it off if I get too warm. I can put it back on if I get too cold, and it's just really comfy to wear. This sweater came out so great in the size. Like everything just came out perfect, and I couldn't have, I think that was like a combination of experience and luck a little bit, but it couldn't have come out better. I used a beautiful yarn from Moonglow Yarn Company, and I used a special yarn that was dyed for me from Whitney called the Love and Stitches Fade Kit. So it goes from a dark pink down, I mean a light pink, down to a darker pink here at the bottom. So this sweater was intended to just be two colors. I believe the original is gray and red, but you could also use up any beautiful colors you have in stash to make these stripes because they really don't take a lot of yarn. I think the rest of the sweater for my size, and I have the project details, took me 4 skeins of fingering weight. So definitely a larger sweater, but not quite as much as I thought I was gonna need when I first looked at it. I honestly would not change a thing about this except maybe to have Whitney bring back this yarn base because I love it so much. I think it's an 80-20 and a 2-ply. Actually, I don't really remember, but it's just the best because it doesn't stretch way too far out like a 75-25 does. It's not super heavy. And this is my favorite thing I made in 2021. After I pulled out all of these items, I was just pulling them out individually. I decided to take a look at them as a collection and see if I could find anything in common. Anything that kind of told me like, hey, Natalie, you may not be picking up on this as you knit over the years, but like you make a lot of X, you make a lot of this kind of color, this kind of style, this kind of fit, these designers. And I looked at all of those things and I was really actually quite surprised by what I found. So number one, let's look at color. So you can see all of my projects laid out here. I think this one doesn't really come as a surprise that I love to knit pink and gray. pink and gray just seem to be my favorite colors at the moment. And for a while I was fighting against like just knitting pink all of the time and trying to buy yarns in other colors. And then those are the yarns that I ended up giving away last year. I had a sweater's quantity of blue that comes to mind, something in rust, something in a dark gray. I don't know. I just ended up being like, those are not the colors that I like to knit, and it's actually okay to knit with the colors that you love. So give yourself permission to do that and notice if there's anything you're not wearing. You can even do this with your own wardrobe, and anything that you're really drawn to, you may be more inclined to wear something if it's a color that you love and enjoy that experience. The second thing that I looked at was the fit of everything, and I took my measuring tape out for this one. So I wanted to kind of compare, even though each of these sweaters was slightly different, I wanted to kind of look at some things and see if I could find any of my personal measurements. Like I know my body measurements, but what about the sweaters? Like what things do they have in common? So the first thing I did was measure the length of a few of the pullover sweaters. And I found that for me, I was really liking a 15-inch body. So from the underarm down to the bottom hem, 15 inches. So now I know when I'm making a sweater that I can probably look at 15 inches. This is for something that doesn't have a really low drop sleeve. You know, obviously everything's going to be a little bit different and I'll always need to try things on, but that gives me a really good ballpark. Even if a pattern says something different, I can say, you know what, for me, I like 15 inches in body length. So take a look at that. Again, you can look at your handmaids or you can look at things that you already have in your closet and like the fit of. I also needed to look at the armhole opening. This has been an issue for me with so many patterns, especially Andrea Mowry patterns. I've heard this from so many people, and it's something that you can adjust, which is so good to know, like what do you actually need for an armhole versus the knitted pattern, because then you can mix and match bust sizes to armhole sizes. And why knit and crochet if you're not going to customize something to make it for you? So I looked at all of my armholes. I wrote this one down. I gotta take a look. And almost all of them were measuring about 11 inches. And most of my sweaters are drop shoulder, so that's important to keep in mind, that it's like a, you know, coming like off the largest part, the shoulder part of the arm, it's a little bit further down. So 11 inches. I'm like, I don't know how many of my sweaters, especially maybe Boxy, lace and fade Boxy is coming to mind, that I really paid attention to that. I'm pretty sure the last sweater that I'm making right now has like a 9-inch armhole. No wonder it's not working, you know, just things like that. So now I'll be able to look at the schematics in the patterns that I pick and make sure to match appropriate armhole sizes for myself when I'm knitting the sweater. So that feels really good to know that about myself. And then the last thing that I looked at was the overall bust size. So I measured this right underneath the armhole to kind of get like the truest bust. And I found that the sweaters that I liked the fit best, the ones that weren't like super duper oversized, like I didn't measure Boxy or something cozy, the ones that are more just like a relaxed fit are 42 inches for the bust. All three of the ones that I measured were that. I think it was the Long Summer Cardi, Like a Cloud, and the Weekender Light, 42 inches, all of them. So that's really interesting to know, and something again for me to keep in mind. So these numbers that I have taken, I'm going to put them into a note on my phone where I have my actual body measurements, and I feel like this is going to really inform my future sweater making and the sizes that I pick. What better to go off of than a finished measurement for a sweater, because it will match into a pattern as well. Then I also wanted to look at like the general style of the sweater, and I noticed that all of these sweaters pretty much have a drop shoulder. So that means that they don't have like that classic like scoop. I think one of them has a little bit of like short rowing, but most of them are just like off the shoulder, you pick up the sleeves and you go. So that seems to be something that I really like. It's easy to knit, and it's also a flattering look, I think, on myself. So I will look for more sweaters like that in the future. All of the sweaters that I like are also pretty straight in the body, and they have a relaxed fit. I guess I can look at my bust measurement versus the finished measurements that I saw. So my bust off the top of my head is about like 34 inches. It's pretty small, but I have a larger hip in comparison. So having a 42 inch, so let's see, quick math, I didn't do this before. 42 inches of finished measurement minus 36 is 8. No, minus 34, sorry, is 8, right? 42 minus 34 is 8. So it looks like my preferences, at least right now, are to get 8 inches of positive ease in my bust, and then that seems to be comfortable for the rest of my body too. So take a look at your finished items that you've been making that you like the fit of, or maybe you can use things that you don't like and say like, oh, this is too tight if I had 4 extra inches or whatever. It can just be really helpful, and I don't know why I haven't intentionally gone back to look at my sweaters before. I could have saved myself a ton of time. One other thing that I noticed is that 3 of the sweaters that I showed you today are all from one designer, Joji Locatelli. I think I already knew this in the back of my head that I really love Joji's patterns. I think one of the reasons that I like them so much is that they have a similar style where they've got the drop shoulder, they've got the kind of like straight boxier fit. I have never met Joji, but from pictures, it kind of seems like maybe we are a little bit similar in body style. I would say she's slim, she's tall. I'm tall-ish. I definitely have a small bust, but I think I'm a little bit hippier than Joji, so just kind of having to make those adjustments for myself. But I think that that's something that is okay to like kind of lean towards a designer, especially one that like you like one of their items, you might like more of them. So if you find that you're always gravitating towards the same designer, maybe kind of like keep that in mind, like, oh, I can kind of rely on this person. They maybe have a style that appeals to me. Maybe they're a similar body shape to you. Maybe they're just an aesthetic that you like, and kind of roll with that. You can continue to work and use and knit and crochet with the same designers all of the time. And it might also help you find similar designers. I wish there was a way to do that. I wonder if there is a way to do that on Ravelry. Like, show me something similar. Maybe there is. I haven't explored it before, but that would be a really great way to kind of help you to pick out your next project and your next project and find continued success. I promised I would show you something that I would never ever make again. And this was totally inspired by Madison, who asked a question on the podcast about projects that I would love to make over and over again. I think any of these patterns that I have shown today are things that I would make again. I would replace if I lost them with maybe the same thing or something very, very similar. But there is one thing that I would never make again. It would have to be like a life or death situation for me to knit this again. Any guesses before I show it? You probably know. It is Slipstravaganza. This is honestly a gorgeous pattern. It is by Stephen West. It was the mystery knit along from 2020, and it was quite the journey for me. So not only did it take me absolutely forever to make this, instead of the 4 weeks during the mystery knit along, it took me like another 4 or 5 months. Once I finally finished it and bound this whole thing off, I then had a hole in this project. So if that doesn't just ruin a project for you, I don't know what will. But the honest thing that I didn't enjoy about this, it's called Slipstravaganza. I just learned that I don't like slipping large numbers of stitches. Small numbers, like maybe 1, 2, or 3 stitches, is totally fine for me, but there were so many places in this pattern where you were slipping, you know what, I don't even like slipping 3 stitches. I'm taking it back. 2 stitches is my max. But you had to slip like, I don't know, 7 stitches or 5 stitches. Am I making that up? We did have to do that, right? I don't know. I just really didn't enjoy doing that. And now I know that about myself. You can also learn from things that you don't like. So for me, whenever I see this right here, because I know it's come back on a lot of his patterns, it looks super cool, but I have to say, that one is not for me, and that is totally okay. I hope this left you feeling inspired to take a look through some of your makes, or maybe just even into your closet, and think intentionally about what you are loving to make, what you are wearing, what you are using, what colors you like, what styles you like, and then use that to inform your future cast-ons. I think it's so fun to just take knitting and crochet and analyze things a little bit and learn more about yourself through the process. That's why I feel like I can never see myself not knitting or crocheting in the future. I've already been doing it for 17 years or something like that, and it's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing, not only out in the world, but my own tastes and preferences, and I think that's what keeps it fresh and fun and exciting. If you do take the time to go through your makes, will you share with us in the comments what kinds of things you're discovering? Maybe you have a commonality that you didn't recognize before, or maybe you already know something about yourself that you always consider before you begin a pattern. So I love to hear from the community and see what kinds of things you have discovered about yourself after watching this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!